Good morning and welcome to On the Bench. I am your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I am joined by Zach Blostein and Chris Nee. Chris Nee is out on the bench. Chris, what bench is this? You're not even on a bench. What are you sitting on?
I guess it would be cement on top of bricks.
Cement on top of bricks. Brett, put that down as a potential podcast title. All right, he's got it there. So Chris is out at the Football League facility waiting out recruits. So the audio is going to be a little different, probably just not as good as normal, but Zach and I are in our normal setups here as we record a morning on the bench to go over Florida State's quarterback for the 2026 season, guys, who we all had on our bingo card at the start of this thing. Really is what we were thinking when the transfer portal opened up, and we were hearing that Florida State was willing to really splurge on a quarterback and was going to be aggressive in the market. And I don't think that's the direction they went. And instead, they're going with someone who I think is maybe a little bit more affordable, has potential to be a solid scheme fit if we're trying to provide some nuance here, but was not the direction we were expecting nonetheless. Not a name that's going to capture the imagination of the fan base. And now we get to see what the rest of the roster looks like. That is Ashton Daniels. Comes over from Auburn after starting 3 other Final Four games of the season. Was previously a starter at Stanford, native of Buford up in North Georgia. Who's talking to you, Chris? All right, yeah, you just mute it when people come by. That's good. That's how we're going to do it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to go into the front office structure as we got to speak to John Garrett for the first time, as well as Michael Alford and Mike Marvell. There's a lot to get to here, and we're going to try to be as poignant and fast-moving as possible to get through it all. Before we go any further, a quick shout-out to our sponsors. First off, Chattanooga Whiskey, crushing it in the craft distillery game. They do an awesome job in the whole process of making unique adult beverages. Their 111 proof is gold standard for me for a value bourbon that's high proof. Their single barrel stuff is really cool, unique. They do everything at a really high level. So please continue to support them as you have. It is a legitimately great product. Speaking of great products, Buyer Sinone, guys, sponsored by both their
Turner Group. Sorry, we were both muted.
Say sorry to Colin.
Sorry, Colin.
All right, sorry, Colin. Colin, Amy Turner, awesome people, do a great job in the home buying, home selling process throughout the state of Florida. I can help you get where you want to go now that you're past the holiday season. I think it's time to start looking at maybe relocating. If you just want to relocate your fandom or something for a season too, understood. They can help you get where you want to go. So emotionally, physically, literally, the Turner Group help you get where you want to go. All right, guys. Broke news last night that we believe that Florida State was circling the wagon for Ashton Daniels. This is after DJ Lagway was on campus, as well as UVA, UNLV, Anthony.
You got it.
Anthony Calandria.
Yep.
Ah,
Calandria.
I feminized him. Calandria. Anyways, we've been working a lot the last few days. It is punchy over here. Anyways, FSU gets Ashton Daniels in the boat. And then once we posted that we thought that was going to happen, that seemed to be where it was going. I think that may have set a record for most downvotes, guys, ever on a singular post, which minus like 200 something right now. Chris, you've been around for a while. That's got to be up there?
Statement number 2 gathered quite a few downvotes. I don't recall the final number, but it was up there.
We're setting records lately. So it was a, I will take level of responsibility in terms of reporting and just not, when we found out he was visiting, not taking that as seriously as probably should have. That's on me. That's a level of maturing to do because it didn't make a lot of sense to me on paper. But lo and behold, that's where it is. So that's on me I will take responsibility there. We started to get chatter that he was the guy on Monday evening and he commits on Tuesday morning officially. So as we get ideas, guys, of what this means for Florida State, what the offense is going to look like, I think maybe before we get any further, let's just talk about Ashton Daniels' background. I think that's probably just to kind of give an idea of why there's this polarizing response out there right now.
So he was a 3-year player at Stanford before he transferred to Auburn this past season. At Auburn, he made a few starts sharing duties with Jackson Arnold. He was 68 for 119, 57.1% this past season for 797 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's also a guy who I'd describe as a capable runner. This past season, 63 rushes for 280. That's 4.5 per rush for 2 touchdowns. The prior season at Stanford really kind of exhibits his ability athletically. 148 for 669 and 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground. One number that kind of stuck out to me, other than he's had issues with passing touchdowns and interceptions. He's basically a 1-to-1 ratio in his career. He's 24 touchdowns, 22 picks. He's also got 11 touchdowns on the ground. So he does have 16 fumbles. So that's obviously, as a guy you're taking, who I think they're taking largely because of his athletic capability as far as using his legs and fitting into the mold of the offense and what they do with it, that's something that's got to get cleaned up. You can't have that where he's averaging that many fumbles and it's that big of a concern. You know, you got to have ball security if you're basically treating it as a glorified running back who can also throw the ball some for you in your offensive set.
Well, that seems to be what FSU is committing to here, is for someone to be a runner, not first, but for that to be a huge part of the offense, which is what Gus Malzahn does. So when we talk about scheme fit, like there is a legitimate plus mobility there when you watch him play. He is a good athlete. He's physical as he runs. So it's a different type of runner than what you had this past year with Tommy, who was more quick, but had to kind of avoid body shots and was not super effective once some of that agility got eliminated. Whereas Ashton Daniels, you watch him, he does move well once he takes off. There's like straight line speed. There's some explosiveness. He has some decent vision as a runner as well. So there are some tools certainly to work with in the Gus Malzahn game, but the passing efficiency that Chris referenced does seem to signal a fairly clear cap in what you can do offensively. I mean, I think that's just the general thoughts on it. Zach, your takeaway here, and just kind of, I'm really curious, man, on your thoughts on the whole recruiting process and just what the last few days, if we start going big picture of the quarterback recruiting stuff. I think that's something we want to kind of dive into as well.
Yeah, I guess my thought is that it feels like the quarterback market was kind of like past Florida State over in a sense. It did not feel like they were willing to spend a certain amount in the portal. And it did not feel like they felt like the amount that they were going to spend was worth it for the options that they were in it for. And, that's something that I tried to bring up with, the whole argument of like, they need to go get a quarterback. Well, like, yes, they do need to go get a quarterback. They need to go get a good one. But that doesn't always mean that they can and or will. And I think we just saw this play out because they don't have unlimited funds. We know that they're not working with a highly competitive, salary right now. Like it's not they're not working from a position of power when it comes to being able to spend financially. And, they negotiated with Anthony Colandrea. What?
Let's go back to that later because I think there's some nuance there. Let's go back to that.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, they negotiated with Anthony Colandrea. They did not want to go up to the amount that he was wanting, which I think has to do with what they like. They're making these evaluations of how much they think guys are worth, and I think they did a cost benefit thing where they went with a cheaper option, which is Ashton Daniels relative to the rest of the market, and maybe they thought that the drop off from maybe a Colandrea to an Ashton Daniels wasn't as much as maybe the money indicated. I don't know this to be like what they're thinking. It's just my theory. And just kind of reading the tea leaves. But that's my thought on it. And just from talking to people around the program, like it does, like it feels like they're kind of working with not a lot of money right now in the portal. They're kind of trying to figure out, the best way to spend it as to not have a, completely disastrous offseason, which we'll get into, when it comes to some of the recent potential portal departures, which is kind of what I think this relates to with the decision to take Ashton Daniels and to not spend what they were willing to potentially spend in the quarterback market this year.
I think with the quarterback market conversation, and I want to go big picture into the entire roster because there's going to be some narratives that are drawn up from what Zach just said, and I think it's going to be reasonable conclusions that people jump to. But I want to try to get into some of the nuance of that because I think that's what this move signifies, is something larger, the idea of roster construction. But specifically at quarterback that I find fascinating, what we've heard, and we don't have this double confirmed or anything yet, but let's say Ashton Daniels is making sub $1 million, somewhere between 750 and 100,000.
That would mean 1 million
or 1 million. I'm sorry. That would put him in the range of, basically what Tommy Castellanos and DJ Uiagalelei made, probably the same as, if not less than those guys over the last 2 years, and certainly less than what Jordan Travis made when he was starting back, what would be 4 seasons ago when this season kicks off. And so the idea of the NIL market has, and the amount of money being allocated towards rosters has gone up exponentially since that 2023 season, where FSU was, in the 95th to 99th percentile for probably our money allocated towards a roster then. And Jordan Travis was probably in that percentile as a quarterback being paid then. And now that you just kind of have scaled down that each and every year, I think, to where the amount of money you're paying your starting quarterback commensurate to the market keeps going down. And we believe FSU is still paying a good amount for its roster. That's where I want to go big pictures. I don't think this is them being, quote unquote, cheap. They certainly do not seem to have the ability to spend. I'll see if I need to add Chris back or not. To see if they have the ability to spend to put together like a 75th percentile roster in college football. Just a number I'm throwing out there, but they don't have the flexibility to go and just be aggressive all across the board. And when it came to trying to attract a top quarterback, like I'm pretty confident that they did offer Anthony Calandria over $2 million, but they had a certain price that they weren't able to go over. And it may have been 2.5, it may have been something like that, but there was a cost value benefit. I don't know what DJ Lagway was. And those are just the quarterbacks that they were able to convince to come visit and have conversations with them at certain price points and discuss. And you're hearing guys like Brendan Sorsby making upwards of $5 million, if not more, at Texas Tech, and brings us to big picture about salary cap and stuff like that. I just find it all fascinating because we're looking and we're vetting FSU through this lens of whether they're able to spend at a high amount or not. And I think that's where I want to go next with this, guys, is I think a lot of their resources are going to retaining, but it's not the retention at value that it was back in 2023. This feels like retention at a premium, at least relative to what retention would normally buy you. And so, Zach, I'll throw this to you, but I think that's kind of what's happening here is we want to set the stage of the last 24 hours with intended departures, retentions from the last week. A lot of money is going to bring you guys back.
Yeah. So they announced a couple of, or they didn't announce. It was, reported that there were a couple of retentions in the secondary. Jabril Rawls, Ashlyn Barker, Earl Little is a potential one. That hasn't been officially confirmed with Earl. But the belief is that you paid all those guys more money after they initially announced to enter the portal. We believe that to definitely be the case with Jabril Rawls. And if Earl Little comes back, I've heard that would also be the case, that he would have gotten a raise. And in turn, some other guys have decided to announce intentions to enter in the last day. And that includes Amaree Williams, the second-year tight end / D-end, who's been playing more D-end as of late. Juice Cryer, a starting linebacker from this past year. Or he's actually officially in the portal. And then the big one was the Desir twins, Mandrell and Darryll Desir, both announced through their agency that they're going to test the portal market. They are not officially in the portal as of when we're recording this on Tuesday morning. We believe that Florida State is working to retain them. That'll be a huge focus here on Tuesday, is to try and get that deal done to keep them from not testing the market because the market will be robust for those two. I've heard LSU, Clemson, Texas A&M, Missouri, some of those schools are potential ones to watch if they do intend or do follow up with actually leaving the program. But FSU is going to try to come to terms with them. A dynamic here that we've confirmed through a few sources now is that we believe there to be we believe that the Desirs actually signed or agreed to a deal here in the last few months, a new deal, one that was different than the one they initially signed to step on campus as high school recruits. That obviously vastly increased their pay, but also included some buyout language to where if they did leave, they would owe money back to Florida State. Or how that works now is that the school they go to would then owe money on top of the salary that they'd be willing to spend for those two. So a lot of interesting dynamics at play. I know that FSU's focus right now is to try and retain the Desir twins. I mean, that's priority number one, I would think. And we'll see. We should get more clarity on today, on Tuesday, on how that's going and where that's developing. Whether we feel like they're have momentum to keep them in Tallahassee, or if they truly will follow through with entering the portal. And just relating this back to the quarterback discussion, I mean, if you connect the two, I mean, you did spend less money than originally planned at the quarterback spot, or you don't even have to say planned, but like they were making offers for much more than the quarterback that they signed and how much that'll cost. So they in theory have more money to have in play for some of their other endeavors, including trying to retain two of the most important players on the roster and the Desir twins.
Sorry for the movement. A couple guys arrived and I didn't want to be right where they were having a conversation with the coaching staff, so I moved down.
That could have been good. That could have been a good scoop though for us.
All Detroit linemen arrived. Who was expected? An Aussie punter.
Nice.
This is great. This is good.
What?
Okay, we're catching up now. It got lagged. Go ahead, Chris. You have the Desir brothers, I would imagine.
I was moving because a couple guys arrived and I didn't want to be where they were having conversations with the staff. Hey, you guys are the ones that wanted me to do this while I'm sitting out here. Like, I don't know what you want me to do.
The Desir brothers, do you have any opinions on that?
I mean, Zach summed it up. They signed new agreements from what I understand, and subsequently, those are the agreements that they're now potentially going to try to get out as of last evening. I don't think they were officially in the portal. I don't know if that's changed this morning. I've been out here. But yeah, I mean, it'd be a massive disappointment to lose them, but that's a culture that we're living in currently, that negotiations are going to continually happen. Guys are going to ask for a lot of money, and the truth is there's not enough money to keep everybody you want to keep unless you have either resources via people stroking large checks to allow you to have more money, or basically corporate sponsorship, something like through Legends at FSU, for example, that allows you to have more NIL to disperse. Till that happens, it's going to be a pick and choose environment, which is no fun and not really the way to assemble or retain a good roster. And I think we're seeing a lot of that play out right now. And I know you spoke about the quarterback being essentially a lower price point than a couple of the other options that they had on campus. I certainly think that's the case. I don't agree with it. I think it's the most important position in football and should be treated and valued as such. But, when you're moving financials around on the table trying to figure this out, that's what's going to come of it.
With the Desir brothers, like I think it's more, to me, like I'm operating on the assumption that you will keep the two twins, and you kind of have to, the way you've sold this off season, and they were talked about as building blocks, and to lose them would be, I don't want to say disastrous, but it would be pretty close to just.
I think it'd be fair to characterize it as disastrous.
But that's like, those two shouldn't. I don't think we should be viewing. it's unfortunate that Florida State's roster is in a place where those two guys are considered disastrous losses because they were solid pieces as true freshmen, which makes you think they can be good players in the future. And you want to keep those type of guys. It's also unfortunate that you're in a position to where if you do lose those two, you look at the defensive line, and you start kind of scratching your head. Daniel
They have
Lyons,
they literally have like 3 defensive linemen returning.
and so the context of what Florida State has allowed to the roster to be would seem disastrous at this time to me. And I think we get overly concerned about optics sometimes, but the optics on this would be bad. And it's already bad because to me, like, I know it's being used as leverage, right? They're not officially in the transfer portal. I get the public posturing that's happening there and that coaches are having to deal with. But like, what was the value? What's the value for this to not happen? I guess you know what I mean. To not have the fan base in this sort of tizzy, to not just get another black eye, and just the 24-hour span of just things that have been suboptimal for Florida State, and just going into what the last year has been in the last 2 years, and it's tough being a Florida State fan. And at a certain point, like, people start checking out when this kind of stuff just makes it less fun. And so I don't know why it got to this point. I don't have privy to every single details, but Zach and Chris have a decent idea of it. It's not optimal. It's suboptimal. And I think it's unfortunate that you've allowed it to get to a place where your 2 building blocks is now a public posturing thing, and you stand the chance to potentially lose them. Just not great. Not great for the fan morale, which has to be that needs to be in consideration at some point, I think, in this. It just doesn't seem to get prioritized often enough for me. Not saying it should be prioritized all the time, but and then Amaree Williams, I have like thoughts on too. Like, that's a guy that you spent probably $500,000 over the last 2 years on to develop, and as like over time, it's not as bad as you're probably spending that on true freshmen right now, but still at the time you spent a good amount on him to be kind of a PR cushion with the Armando Blunt stuff and to develop him because you saw a lot of potential there. But you knew it was going to be a slow burn, right? Because he was reclassifying, he was playing multiple positions, he was going to be growing into his body. And so you pay this premium at the time to get the chance to develop him. And now you've squandered that. Like you got him, you moved him around to different positions. You really didn't get much out of him. And now the chance that he hits the open market, which has been taken off the roster, you don't get the fruits of that labor there. So that's not great either. Zach got a phone call. Chris, if you can hop in, I know you're moving along right now, but I feel like I've been talking for a long time here.
All right, sorry. Yeah,
He's
I mean,
sitting on the
Amaree,
bench. He's on the bench.
The disappointment with Amaree is that you've invested 2 years of development into him, and the potential of not getting a return on that exists now. The thing that I don't know, like the last few days have been long days. Calandria was a wild moment out here, for example, that reinforces the current state of college athletics and what schools are dealing with and how this all goes about. But the other thing about yesterday was they got a really good running back commitment in Trey Weisner, a kid coming from Texas who was ultra productive 2 seasons ago and pretty good this past season. And like, nobody cares. It was completely overshadowed by the twins and Williams and all that happening, and then Daniels' development in the evening. And like, that's disappointing to me. Like, you got a really good piece. You got a kid who's potentially your running back one, certainly going to bolster that room with Chroma and potentially Sam Singleton. And I think he is I think that was Cam Martin putting his fingerprints on sort of what he wanted, what it needs to be, all of those things. And like, it didn't matter. Like, nobody cares. Like, it's overshadowed horrendously. And that to me is like a microcosm of what yesterday was in a nutshell for this program. And that's a disappointing thing to me. But
I don't fault people for being.
That's where we're at.
I don't fault people for being frustrated with the last 24 hours, though.
No, I don't. And I'm not trying to come off that way. It's not that. To me, it's like you added a really good piece that can help you win football games. And it was so overshadowed because you lost 3 young, talented pieces, one of whom was a freshman All-American, and definitely showed a high level of potential, put together some really good stat stuff, definitely stuff that he can put in bio that puts him on par with like Brian Burns and some of those guys for what he did in his first year in a Seminole uniform, you're potentially losing that. So like, it's just like, you land a good uppercut, but you take 15 jabs to the face and you still get knocked down. Like, that's what yesterday felt like to me. And that just sort of all stinks in this whole thing. Like, I guess I'm reserved to the point where like I've accepted, I think this is sort of the fate of what the program is for the coming year, where eventually the amount of funds you have available to assemble a roster to a high level is simply not there. And to retain some really good pieces, which is a necessity because you have to have somewhat of a few guys you can point to on the roster that are in-house development who can make you a good football team and certainly play a valuable role on your two deep. That forces your hand financially where it limits you when you're in the transfer market for trying to get where you're trying to get based on what FSU seems to be dealing with. If this is me wishing for something, it's that FSU could stroke a check and go truly get high-level players in the portal and develop a roster to the level it needs to be what this program should be, what it should aspire to be. But that's not what this is. And I'm just trying to live in what I think is reality of this entire situation, that when you're having to stroke large checks for multiple corners to return, or I'm sorry, a corner to return, multiple safeties to return, potentially 2 to 3 defensive linemen to return, Deuce Robinson to return, which is a great return, but again, probably a very expensive one in its own right. It limits what you're then able to go essentially purchase on the open market. And the open market is so wild with figures, financial figures, that guys wanting to test and agents pushing their individuals to go test it for them to also get a return on it. It exists. And that's just sort of, as I've sat out here for basically the last 4 days straight, that's been driven directly into my heart between watching the Calandria thing, which was just like, if you football still existed in its own form, it died right then and there for you. And then, two really talented twins that FSU tried to do the right thing by locking up and solidifying with. Doesn't matter. Like, they're still going to potentially try to market, even though, as we understand, there's buyout structures and information like that with the new contracts, figures that were increased upon from what they signed here for going into their second season.
There's a lot to get to there. I think on the Trey Wisner, going back to that part of it, that the way you 2 steps backwards after a step forward deal, like that feels like such a
fan reaction to that, because it happened like 10 minutes after the news of the Desir twins potentially going in the portal.
Yeah, it was
a fan reaction to that was like, if that happened beforehand, people would have been hyped. I mean, that like Wisner led Texas in rushing the last 2 seasons, and he ran for 1,000 yards in the SEC 2 seasons ago. I'm not like, we can get into the nitty gritty of who he is as a player and all that, but like, that's an exciting addition on its own. But because it came on the heels of a really bad PR hit, like fans are like, I don't care. Like, delete this. Like,
we're guilty of it too. It took us 25 minutes to talk about it to get into it with him. And listen, like that, there's, I think, there's broader topics to be discussed right now. And so
it's also it's the running back position. I mean,
it's not quarterback. It's not
quarterback. It's not, 2 promising players in the trenches that FSU's, struggled to recruit and develop and evaluate for Norvell's entire tenure. Like, and these are the 2, like basically only success stories out of the high school ranks. I guess you can count Pat Payton, but like, I mean, these are guys that like, I think Terrence Knighton did a presser and was like, yeah, like, I don't think they're leaving. And Mandrell said the same thing, I think, in the fall. Like, you just can't afford to lose them. So that's why, we and the fans, fall victim of caring so much about these specific developments, because they're more important.
We will get into a more analytical look at all the additions that Florida State's having during the transfer portal window, what the fits of it look like. I broke down Trey Wisner, scouting report on Knowles247.com. I'm sure the X's and Knowles guys will have some analysis on that as well. So there will be outlets for that as well. But it's just kind of a podcast that can ebb and flow into minutia or broad, and we're going to do both of that. But like the quarterback position, kind of what your lot in life is, allowed you to do there, I think is probably the more poignant and topical stuff for today. I think as we kind of close the book here on the big picture stuff of the roster outlook and how you're spending money, I don't want to skim over the part of that you are being taxed internally. Is what it sure seems like to me. That's an opinion that is coming off. It's an informed opinion with information. Is that you are having to pay for a Jabril Rawls or an Earl Little, probably comparable to what they would get on the open market. Maybe more. I think it depends on who you hear from. Only a handful of people have the true answers to that. But it's not these hometown discounts that brings you the extra value of retaining guys. And so much of their budget, it seems like, has been chewed up by these retentions, and it continues. And obviously, it's expensive to go out and add a transfer portal player. Probably, generally, usually more expensive, and it's not always it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. If you're in the kind of revamp stage, it's not always an upgrade. So the idea of retaining is good, but you're coming off of a 5-win season. You're having to pay a premium for your own talent, and that's creating an issue where it's taking away money elsewhere. I know people hear all this and probably think we're broke. I can't in good faith say that that's what's happening. I also don't think your roster and the additional NIL allocation that you have budgeted is at an elite level to be able to make up for what the on-field product has been the last 2 years. And that's clearly now punitive and taxing you at this point. And I don't think that's something to dismiss. And one other point too is you brought in 32 freshmen. Some of those guys you're paying a lot of money for, upwards of close to $1 million for some of the top ones, or maybe like 800,000 or 750 or so, a lot.
That was something we brought up, like just about the, how it could be a potential detriment to the new, GM / front office hires, because they're coming in and basically a third of their roster has been spoken for without them having any say for it. And part of that is how much money is being allocated towards those players. So, I mean, it's a tough situation to walk into, but I mean, I guess they knew what they were getting into, John Garrett and Taylor Edwards. But I mean, it does create some kind of financial limitation to what they can do to address needs on the roster.
Have we talked enough about? I feel like we kind of just skimmed over the actual Ashton Daniels player and fit. Go ahead, Chris.
One thing I want to add is, I've tried to dive into Ashton Daniels as much as possible since yesterday. I watched that Vandy cut up that somebody shared on the site where it showed every single one of his throws. I watched some more highlights. I tried to watch a little bit of that Kentucky game, which I think was one of his worst performances of last year, Vandy being one of his best performances of last year. I came away decent runner. For example, in the running department, in his 297 career carries in college, he has 52 runs of time or more. 26 of those came in 2024 at Stanford, which was an ultra-productive rushing year for him. So that was sort of a number that stood out to me. Passing-wise, watching a large amount of his highlights and throws at Auburn, there were 4 that kind of grabbed me. I thought, man, that's really, really good throw. A lot of it's very short and quick stuff, which this offense infuses plenty of with Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. But the arm strength didn't wow me by any stretch. A lot of stuff to the outside, I felt like I had a little bit come back to it to save the arm a little bit. There weren't a whole lot of putting it on a dot kind of throws to me. I don't know. I wanted them to aspire for so much more at that position than what I think Ashton Daniels can provide. I do think Ashton Daniels can do some positive things within the offense. I will say in my limited interaction with the young man yesterday, found him to be a mature guy and, pretty straightforward. And certainly I would presume there's a good bit of intelligence between the ears with the fact that he did go to Stanford too. So, I don't want to be a complete Debbie Downer on the young man, but it does not excite me as a quarterback take for FSU, despite the fact that I do think it is a system fit, unlike what I thought of what a DJ Legwood would be.
Yeah, I don't want to be totally negative either, because I think there are elements to his game that bring value, and the ability to win. I hate putting a number on it so early. Like you can be a winning football team with him, with the pieces around him if they're right, and that's what they're trying to do right now. I think there's a clear cap on it too. I hate to be negative in that regard and saying, but the passing, the running ability is good. It's not elite to mask what is subpar passing efficiency. I do disagree a little bit with Chris on. I think he has good velocity as a passer. I think the footwork and accuracy at this point in his career is just it probably most likely is what it is, and that leads to the ball kind of fluttering sometimes. But you like some of the RPO stuff he does, he gets it out quick. He can make legitimate crossfield deep out like throws. Like there are some abilities that are pretty cool there. But when you see the career numbers as a passer, and it's basically a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Some of the accuracy stuff, I pulled that up on PFF earlier. The career accuracy numbers are better than what Tommy Castellanos was, who was one of the worst in the Power 4 coming into Florida State. But still, you're in the bottom, I think, the bottom 30 percentile or so with him. So it's still not a strength. He's not an accurate passer.
It is an interesting decision to then compare to what John Garrett told the media as far as what he looks for in a quarterback eval, because he mentioned decision making, not turning the ball over, accuracy as some of the most important factors he looks at, maybe more so than the physical tools. He kind of was like telling the media like, hey, like a lot of people misevaluate the quarterback position because they pay too much attention to the physical tools. Well, I mean, you look at Ashton Daniels' career and just like you mentioning the touchdown interception ratio, some of the accuracy stuff is not great. It's inconsistent at best.
Chris said like 11 fumbles or something in his career. He's
I want to say,
but yeah, he's had some high fumble. Well, he runs it a lot too, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, and John Garrett said, Zach, that accuracy was like the physical tool that he thought was important in terms of like being able to weigh that, and that number shows that that's not very good. It's not awful, but it's not good. It's below average. So that's a really good point. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean it kind of segues into what I don't know if we want to move into this, but like what I feel like was the most important part of that press conference that was held yesterday of John Garrett and Michael Alford and Mike Norvell, which was that Mike Norvell has the final say on all roster decisions and any decision within the program, according to Michael Alford and John Garrett.
And we had heard that before, but to actually now get that, in the opening statement, like that was a prepared statement that Michael Alford had to read off of. That was, intentional. Put that out there, and John Garrett was asked about that. So to set the stage, there was a press conference between Michael Alford, Mike Norvell, and John Garrett, all three simultaneously, went about 30 minutes. They were all on a stage together. That was a little dicey. To me, there was something kind of symbolic where you're trying to jam these three people. What? Why are you rolling your eyes?
You're always looking for some symbolism.
Well, yeah, that's I write.
They were sitting on chairs and they were so close to
It was forced. No.
I mean, yes.
All right, Bias or Known, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
This situation feels a little forced and overarching.
By
Snone.
You happy?
Chris says Sinone.
Oh.
Okay, explain it, please.
Explain what? Why I'm saying
Sinone. You got an answer.
I think you're overanalyzing the whole thing.
You always say that, but then you can't just because I'm thinking about it more than you doesn't mean I'm overanalyzing it. Like, is what I'm saying incorrect? That this isn't a.
I'm analyzing it correctly. You're overanalyzing it clearly.
Yeah,
I mean,
clearly
your actions speak more than your words. No, I thought it was awkward that they had all three speak together. I think there would have been more value to solely John Garrett and Taylor Edwards, the new I forget Taylor's exact title, acquisitions individual in that front office structure, to maybe do something together. But I think it's also a matter of time and money. And right now in the portal season, it's about time. I mean, Mike Norvell was clearly not aggravated. I don't think it's the right word, but he was in two places at one time during that press conference. He's also dealing with kids coming in and out of that building and negotiations with current players. and also dealing with recruits that were currently on campus. I mean, in the time they talked, I think Lagway had just left, but like Ashton Daniels is still here. They have 2 O linemen who are approaching, coming into town, Braden Joyner and Mikey Bennett, the Yale offensive lineman were coming in. So like, he's trying to fit a 30 to 40-minute press conference window into the midst of all doing that. So like, I didn't think that was much. I wasn't at the press conference. I was out here doing portal stuff. I did listen to said press conference this morning and watch portions of it while listening to it. It felt very prepared for, I guess is the words that came to mind for me while watching it.
Forced, maybe you would even say?
No, I felt it was prepared for. I felt opening statement was intentional, as you stated. And then, the most illuminating responses for me were John Garrett's.
How so?
Well, 1, it's somewhat new information. 2, it didn't feel ultra canned. 3, it gave insight into the way he operates mentally, both in his time here previously and now in his extended role here now. This time, and I just thought there was value in it. You asked a question. I asked you to ask said question. I think it was also a question you had an interest in. The continuing building out of a front office. What is it going to look like? What are the roles that are coming? Got kind of a canned response on that. That's the thing to me that like the action that I want to see. I think that's an area where they have to continue to bolster, get deeper, have more valuable people, both on the sense of scouting individuals and preparing and understanding basically how to build a value-based roster at its most optimal tune. And then obviously on the money side, the financial side, helping somebody like Taylor, Edwards, and others in doing that and putting them in the best position to do that. To me, those are roles that financially are a drop in the bucket versus what it's costing to assemble a collegiate roster now. And you got to do everything to be as optimal as you can in doing a roster. It's clear that FSU is not an oil tycoon or single stroke check type of school where they can go and just acquire talent basically willy-nilly. It has to be completely value-based to build the best basically 2 deep you can, to be as competitive as you can, to attempt to put yourself in position to compete for the league that you're in, therefore a conference title and potentially a playoff thing. And FSU, in my opinion, there's a large gulf between where they are currently and getting to that point.
So I would like to go over just my takeaways from the press conference. Some of this is things that we knew. Some of it are things that we believe. Some are things that we didn't know. And so it was good. I thought there was actual clarity to it. I pushed back on the people who did not think there was like poignant questions that were asked. I thought we got a lot of clarity on that, but I understand that not all the answers were super pleasant either. So what I want to do is go over things that I learned, takeaways. And when you guys want to, please, actively listen. Just put your hand up, and I will stop it when we want to get to that point. The first off is the one that Zach mentioned, and I think it's the most important, was clarifying the power structure. And that is that Mike Norvell will have final say on matters. That does not mean it won't be collaborative. Mike Norvell went out of his way to say that, and I believe that he will as well. Like I think that he always has been. Willing to be collaborative and to listen to other ideas, but there's now more voices, more information he'll be getting, more people helping him out and assisting and handling negotiations and providing extra data and resources. But John Garrett, not only did Michael Alford talk about it, John Garrett said like it's his job to help out Mike Norvell. He has the HC on his chest. Like he's the head coach. It's his job to give him the most information as possible. So that is a takeaway. We were wondering what the power structure would be. We now have an idea of what the power structure is. And so that is significant. To that point, I guess I wonder, what really changed. If we're talking about this being a front office overhaul, it seems like more it's a tweak, a tinkering of the process, a reinforcing of what it already was and maybe strengthening it, but not a total overhaul on how business is done. That's my initial takeaway from the way they explained it to us. Go ahead, Chris.
I agree with you. At this stage of this process, I don't think you can call it an overhaul. I think, obviously they created an individual who reports ultimately to Mike Alford, which allows for a little flexibility in his job role in the sense of having a voice and being comfortable. He doesn't answer Mike Norvell as much as he answers Mike Alford as far as his job status. But ultimately, it's taking a guy who was already in your scouting department previously before his departure for Duke and increasing his said role while also making the additional hire of Taylor Edwards for the financial side of it. But there's more that has to be done for this to be called a front office. That does, in my opinion, that does not qualify for building out a front office. And to add to that, I believe, again, in response to your question, Michael Alford said that they intend to make more hires, have more roles, and build it out further. But again, action has to be seen for that to be believed.
And they want Taylor Edwards as well as obviously John Garrett to have say in what kind of roles they need, what kind of, what people they want, but what roles they actually need to assist them. And so that is an aspect where that is a little different, where the front office is putting an evaluation and putting in processes of other people who would be hired. So I do think that is a noteworthy difference in operating procedure. Another point that I think was interesting is that Michael Alford talked a little bit about the timeline, right? And the criteria of what they were looking for from this position. They wanted someone that had NFL experience and also college experience. So they wanted kind of the best of both worlds there. And throughout the process, why they didn't start this, back in October after the Stanford loss when they were doing their assessment. And, he discussed the why was he thought a thorough internal evaluation and even the external one they had with the athlete group to come in as the consulting firm was going to be needed to, you had to be able to have like legitimate sit downs with people who were, in the midst of working at that point. You had to be able to have interviews with personnel members and coaches to get an idea of what's happening. And they thought it would be a disadvantage to do it in season. And so that was his explanation. And then in addition to, go ahead, Chris.
I disagree with that. I think it's solely to kind of excuse a slower timeline. Again, it's a process that should have begun the second that you lost to Stanford. You should have been living in two worlds, one where potentially you have to make a head coaching change, the other one where you have to potentially do, one where you may have to make a head coaching change, and the other one where you have to do a front office structure, regardless if it's for your current head coach or your next head coach. And in my opinion, it should have been something that there should have been much more time and effort really put into in the basically 4 to 5 weeks in between statements.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Chris. And then the other part of what they said, once that process actually started and they kind of realized what the marching orders were, what direction they were going, the candidates, the pool that they were looking at for that top position, according to Michael Alford, were guys who were, quote unquote, championship caliber. And that meant either playing for programs that were playing for conference championships in college or NFL teams that are, in the playoffs. And he said still in the postseason. As well. So, that was part of it too, is that they were struggling to, I shouldn't say struggling, the idea of starting the interview process really thoroughly and those conversations going was difficult to do at that point in early December. Let's see. Norvell will not be a part of negotiating with players, but will be privy to funds resource allocation. Again, that kind of goes to him still overseeing it all, but delegating some of that responsibility. Although Derek Ray was big on negotiations and stuff for them a year ago. So I don't think that's a huge change necessarily. And as a quick aside, we had heard during the Anthony Calandria, I feel decent about this without being in the room. During the Anthony Calandria negotiations, it was John Garrett doing the actual negotiation with the agents, but then John Garrett would have to check in with Mike Norvell on a certain price or a certain promise or something like that. So, it seems like it's still a general, as is, pecking order of how it was working. The other thing that I wanted to go over was how FSU views the salary cap structure. And I think some of Michael Alford's comments from it in May, when, the House settlement was going through, but there was still a lot of stuff being discussed with that, and then even to August, and then finally here, January 5th, the idea of this FSU's view of the salary cap has seemingly shifted a little bit each time, I think. Would you guys agree with that, having looked at the quotes previously and heard how they've discussed it in the past?
I think there's a attempt at softening the language of separating the idea of the cap and the NIL that you're able to spend over it. Now, they would contend that they have consistently talked about there being NIL that you could spend on top of it.
So I think
but I just think that the messaging in general on that topic long term here has been poor, and basically it paints a picture that FSU isn't doing everything it can to maximize the financials that they have to assemble and keep a roster. And again, beyond what's in the cap, their abilities to do things, for example, through Legends, which is something that FSU uses for a multitude of things within the building, to create more financial opportunities for your student athletes to put more money into their pocket in the sense of the NIL and what they are making. And I think that's a place where, if we're going to call it, I guess, a machine here at FSU, I think it has to improve. I think that's a lesson that will be learned again this offseason, as it may have been learned last offseason, but not by everybody.
Yeah, some MMRs, it's media rights places. So like Learfield was one previously, and that means that you're selling a lot of the stuff that's like Truist is on the side of Florida State's field or whatever, like that. You're making deals with that, and that's a lot of some of those other big MMR have been able to funnel money to rosters, as far as we understand it. I don't know that Legends currently does. I think they might be being worked on, but I don't know that for sure that's something they currently do. So that's something you have to explore and catch up on, because you need to find every cent and dollar possible, clearly, especially if other people are doing it. I think that the phrasing of the salary cap stuff, 7 or 8 months ago, a year ago, was, yes, you could always go, there's a salary cap and that would be enforced, and then there would be the opportunities for NIL afterwards. I think that's always been discussed. I always viewed the way that afterwards the NIL stuff was kind of dismissive. I was like, there'd be some money for it, is how I always viewed it. It wasn't being taken as like there was going to be this supplementary of $5-10 million like some places are doing it. And then the enforcement of it obviously has just not occurred. And that part of it was a miscalculation. There was an idealistic of what it would look like versus what it now is. And so I think that's an angle. Chris, get him out. Kick him out. All right. Wow. Zach, what are your thoughts on that?
Quite the view.
Chris hugged me yesterday because he thought I needed it, and that was pretty much my view, as I was swaddled into his bosoms. Felt good.
Sorry, Riles Lee came by, long-time FSU employee.
Yeah, I could just see Riles back. That's awesome.
And I hadn't seen him. He had some health-related stuff. So, sorry, I had to say hi. Yeah, Riles supersedes you guys. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, that's all right. He came. The Amaree Williams stuff was popping yesterday. I sat on the bench, and all of a sudden he showed up, and I was like so conflicted. I was like, Riles, I'm going to come see you in a second, but like stuff's happening, and then we got to catch up, which was good. But I think that is noteworthy too, that the messaging on the NIL stuff is altered a little bit. So those were the main takeaways that I had. Zach mentioned the John Garrett quarterback viewpoint. I think it's very interesting to see what John Garrett and his colleagues at Duke did this past year with the quarterback and who they brought in versus what Florida State did. I think it's very different sides of the spectrum in terms of financial ability and what was valued there in terms of skill set. It does make me think, it reinforces the idea that Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell still have a lot of say in that quarterback room. And I think this has been instructive in that regard. All right. I feel like I've talked a lot. I feel like I haven't heard from you guys as much. That's on me.
They just signed the Purdue center, Braden Joyner.
Okay.
So I was writing that up.
Okay. This podcast has been a great microcosm of portal hell that we live in. During it, John Walker commits to Ohio State. Braden Joyner signs with FSU. 3 kids arrive at FSU on the day. One of them was already here yesterday, and Mikey Bennett. I say hi to like 7 different people. I think I walked about 500 steps during it. I probably almost cursed at you guys at least once, but I think I've held my New Year's resolution. No cursing on the podcast for me so far. Sonone hasn't held that.
I just said, shit.
Good times.
We can do that. We don't have to edit that out. We'll do it like once or twice, and not at the front. The losing the UCF defensive tackle, John Walker, which also John Walker, Johnny Walker. There's a Paps. There's a beers on campus. There's a lot of like booze related themes that would again, we're gonna talk about whiskey, Chattanooga whiskey. I almost said the Turner Group. My brain's fried. But listen, losing out on John Walker. You had the first visit there. He commits to Ohio State. Zach, that's a toughie. I don't think that was a elite prospect, but as far as capable nose tackle types in the transfer portal, there's not a whole lot of other ones that I feel like are attainable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? Is that, while I don't think John Walker is some, elite Braden Fisk type defensive tackle talent. Not that they are the same, type of player, but like as far as impact, it's more so the fact that they don't have other like real options. Like they haven't brought in a single other defensive lineman, and to my knowledge, they don't have another one coming in anytime in the near future. Things change. I know they're trying to get some players in, but as far as like interior defensive linemen, I really haven't heard much there. There's another guy committed to Arkansas State, or from Arkansas State, that's likely to commit to Auburn, it seems like, Cody Sigler. Christopher, go ahead.
I reached out this morning to Sigler's representation, who I spoke to as he was leaving Auburn a couple days ago. At that point, the expectation was that he probably would not make it here. He was supposed to come in here tomorrow, Wednesday, January 7th. God, I wish it was June. I checked again this morning. I have not heard back, but that is something. As soon as John came off the board, I figured FSU is probably making a Hail Mary call there if he has not signed with Auburn, and trying to see if they can at least still get him on campus tomorrow. So monitoring it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a big deal that John Walker goes to Ohio State. They had the first visit there. FSU did, had him on campus for an entire day. It was, one of those longer transfer visits. Usually they wrap up in one day, but he was there a day and then into the morning. And, he leaves and goes to Ohio State. And I think, most people could kind of read that was headed that way once he left campus and decided to take another visit to, one of the most prolific programs in the country right now. So, yeah, I
thought they were gonna get him still. And so that's on me for having belief and faith. I won't do that.
It is on you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where the defensive line, obviously you have to retain the Desirs. But that's a huge point of concern for me. I mean, you essentially lost nearly the entire room, and they don't really have anyone on the transfer market coming in to potentially fill a need there as of now. That feels like they're kind of in a dire spot. And I mean, I don't even want to talk about if they lose the Desirs.
Go. We're not doing that game anymore, Chris, but thank you for raising your hand.
They currently are returning Deontay McCray, Daniel Lyons, Grant Fielder, Kevin Wynn, Tylon Lee on the defensive line. Obviously, a large group of incoming players in that bunch, 9 of them coming in, most of them high school, but you also got Jalen Anderson, who's a JUCO prospect. There is a possibility that one player from last season, who at one point I thought eligibility was probably out for, may end up returning as Diamante Diggs. That's to be determined. I expect an updated roster from FSU sometime in the next week or so, and that should provide clarity on that. At one point, basically at the end of November into December, when I started tracking the roster like this, expected him not to be returning. That was the feedback we got. I think that has shifted over the last month, and the possibility exists. He would have an additional year because of a medical red shirt for last season. He only played, I think, 3 games before the neck injury. So, yeah, pretty dire in that group. And obviously, there is a young man from Texas A&M that they had in this week as a transfer who's a defensive end. He is one that I think they do get into the class here as a transfer. But, yes, there are major pressing needs. Even with a potential return of the Twins and or Williams, I think there are still major needs, especially with an interior guy.
I agree. The defense to me feels I have concerns. Unless guys take big steps forward.
Yeah, I mean, linebacker. I know we love talking about linebackers on here, but
has anyone ever been more vindicated than Zach Blaustein on linebackers?
We don't need to.
The funny thing is, we went into the portal season concerned about the secondary, and that's the least concerning part of the defense now.
Yeah, probably dropped like $20 million into it.
These things happen quickly.
Yeah,
don't say that big of a number. Somebody's going to run with that and believe.
Yeah, sorry. I was being tongue in cheek.
Self-control, my friend.
Yeah, it's my fault that someone would take that seriously. I'm not apologizing. No, I'm not. I'm redacting any apology I just issued there. The only person I'm sorry to is Colin. That's it.
Linebackers. Juice Cryer leaving. Omar Graham deciding whether he wants to stay or not.
I believe he'll stay.
Yeah, I think so too. But
I'd like him to decide personally. I need finality here. Omar, provide it for me, buddy.
I hope he takes another 2 weeks. Yeah, then I've heard that
Blake Nicholson probably coming back as well.
Yeah.
Prepare to shell. So no, kiss of death.
So yeah, I mean they've got some guys returning in that room with experience, but it was not a good room in 2025 to say the least. And I just don't know why it didn't feel like it was a huge priority for them when the portal opened, but now all of a sudden when Juice is leaving and potentially Omar's leaving, they're like scrambling to try and recruit a linebacker. Like how can you evaluate this roster and think that that's not a spot you need to improve at?
Did we talk, because I think they spent a lot of money on the freshmen coming in. Did we talk about John Papuchis leaving?
I don't think we did.
Like if this is the only way that people get their FSU news, which I would recommend you go to Knowles 24/7. I'm sure if you're listening to us, you're listening to other podcasts and checking out other ways. But if not, probably should have told you that John Papuchis is going to be.
Yeah. Ernie Sims is the new linebacker coach.
First reported by Chris. Yeah. So that's interesting as well.
We're in a good spot.
I just say, yeah, I don't want to be overly emotional right now. This has not been the 24 hours of great news.
This wasn't what you were promised.
I don't know. It's so interesting.
I began my day yesterday taking photos of DJ Legway. In the middle of my day, I interviewed DJ Legway. I ended my day writing about Ashton Daniels. It was a hell of a day.
I don't know, guys. I don't know. The idea that Florida State is punting, because you see Ashton Daniels and you see the career stuff. I don't like talking pejoratively about the player. Like this is not fun. I don't like these exercises. Never mind. I don't know how to talk about it, guys. I don't know how to talk about it without being what feels like overly negative.
It's just
you don't either, because you can't.
Yeah,
it's not a way.
I don't entertain the punting term with regards to it. Do I think they're trying to be as good as they can be and maximizing everything? No.
I agree.
Do I think they're legitimately punting, like completely just not giving a, what about next season? No. I think it firmly lands in the middle of those two procs.
And when you say they, I don't think you mean like we know the coaches are out there grinding right now.
Well, I mean the entirety of it. I mean the coaches. I mean the talent acquisition. I mean the overseers who keep the program in check. I mean everybody. It's
stroke checks. Yeah.
They don't. Mike Laufer walks over to the football only facility pretty much every day and meets with the head coach and other people in the building. Like it's not one of these things where they're independent of one another.
I just the microcosm, I think, for where Florida State is here today, early January, is you're paying likely 25% less for your starting quarterback in 2026 than you did in 2023. And just given how the market has exploded in that same stretch, I don't know what the difference is of what the average starting quarterback makes now versus then. But the adapting with the times and putting yourself in a position to not just adapt with the times financially, but to have an attractive home for quarterbacks to be able to have those conversations with, 2 years ago, a Cam Ward no longer exist. And I think, the best you can do is either, is career G6 quarterbacks or broken toys to try to fix them. You're operating with severe limitations at the most important position. I think that is the microcosm of where Florida State is at right now. This isn't the program, the rosters that are being assembled these last few years are not the rosters that Chris Nee grew up on. Like it's just not. And yeah, I don't know how else to say it. It's just, this is disheartening. Disheartening to see that this is the optimal place you can be, but maybe they'll find some pieces here in the transfer portal still and elevate. I don't know. Man, am I being too negative, Zach? I'm really trying not to be. But it is. That's the only thing I can do. It's just, it's not. The more I think about it, the more I try to articulate it. It's just not overly positive. I can't spin it in any other way, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're not being overly negative. I mean, we got to provide our thoughts on, you know, each of these developments, and, you know, I mean, it's just all, for me at least, it's all clouded in this overarching view of just how this football program and athletic department have been handled over the last 2+ years. And even before that, I mean, it's just, you can get into all of it that we've hashed over 100 times by now, but it's just, yeah, I mean, seeing the state it's in, like the thing with the quarterback stuff that gets to me is, like, they set out to do something when it comes to, you know, how much they were going to spend, and spending much more than they had the previous 2 seasons, and ever, basically, for a portal quarterback. And then they basically just resulted in doing what they've done the last 2 years, and potentially, you know, budgeting even more at that position relative to the market. You know, I don't think that's, you know, off to say. So that's why it's just like, and then I go to, like, the fact that, like, Ashton Daniels is going to be, you know, likely going to be quarterback 1, and he's going to have to field the hate of, you know, potentially things not working out from this fan base. And it's like,
I saw someone say, I can't wait to boo him, and it's like, you know, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like, and I know we're not talking about him in a glowing light, but it's like, this isn't his fault. That this is maybe there's something untapped. Maybe the fit is so good that you can maximize it all, you know, optimally. I will say, like, you get Deuce Robinson coming back, that's good. I like what you have at running back. I feel better about that this year, what you're putting forward. The offensive line, I am skeptical that that's going to be as good as it was last year. I thought what you did last year on the fly was relatively really good and just overall solid, fine. And I think you're kind of picking from a different caliber of player there, because you're having to probably pick and choose what you can financially commit to there. You're having to allocate to places. So yeah, I'm going to end it because I don't have anything else really, I think, productive to say on this. This wasn't the splash that you thought Florida State was capable of. I think that's the last thing I'll say, is that DJ Lagway provided, at least during that window of, like, yeah, you knew there was variance there, but, like, the ability for this fan base to dream for a little bit of, like, what could be, not to say it was likely, but what was possible, I think was there. And then that got robbed from them really quickly. And then, you know, it was a career, you know, 1-for-1, you know, touchdown interception passer. And so I think that swing, that momentum, that emotional swing probably did not help matters last night either. But yeah, this is who you're rolling with most likely. I think they will probably, Zach, go with looking at maybe adding one more piece. Quarterback room, I don't think like a starter. I think maybe like a younger transfer, a JUCO player, someone else to kind of develop and see. Yeah, and then we'll go from there. Anything else?
No, I do want to say, like, I have heard that as recently as just now, that they are looking for, like, a backup quarterback type, you know, like Brooklyn kind of replacement, I think. So that'll be something else to track as well.
All right. Well, for Chris Nee, Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sinum. This has been another uplifting episode of On the Bench. We'll talk to you guys when we talk to you.